Have you considered plant-based milk alternatives, but as a diabetic, you're concerned about what these might do to your blood sugar? Or maybe you're intolerant or allergic to dairy, but again, you're just not sure, hey, which of these plant-based milks are good for you? Or maybe you're lactose intolerant and you are very well aware of the fact that lactose-free milk actually has a more negative impact on your blood sugar than regular whole milk. Or maybe you just want to avoid cow's milk because of the hormones that are used in some of the cows to produce these milks, right? Well, if you are concerned about plant-based alternative milks and you want to learn more and have a better idea of which ones you might be better off choosing, then you're going to want to listen to this video. So hang tight. We're going to talk about 5 different dairy alternatives or milk alternatives that you might consider choosing and which ones might be better than the others. And we're going to make a comparison to cow's milk. Before we get into it, I'm Dr. Amina, Goodwin, a physician and a health coach, and I help you get your blood sugar levels and keep them normal without taking more medicines. Why would you want to keep normal blood sugar levels? Well, so you can have good energy throughout the entire day and be able to do what it is you want to do, so that you can avoid food cravings and therefore control weight gain, especially as you grow older, and so that you can have a normal, longer, overall healthier life. All right, let's get into it. Milk alternatives. Cow's milk, that's been a part of the human diet for a long time. Milk is actually one of the few almost nutritionally complete foods. It has almost equal amounts of the 3 main macronutrients, fat, carbohydrates, and protein. And if you look at the label of a whole milk carton, 1 serving is 1 cup, and you will see that it has about 8 grams of fat, 12 grams of carbohydrates, and 8 grams of protein. So those are the 3 main macronutrients, and almost equal amounts of them. There's a little more carbohydrates, but you have quite a good amount of protein and fat to balance out the carbohydrates. Obviously, milk is baby's food, and it's nature's way of providing the baby with a total nutrient, like a complete nutrient food. And so we take advantage of this in terms of using milk and adding it to some of our other foods, right? Some people they have a preference for goat's milk, which goat milk is similar to cow's milk in terms of the macronutrient content. So goat milk might have about, I wrote some notes here, maybe about 7 grams of fat, 11 grams of carbohydrates, and 8 grams of protein. So very similar to cow's milk. But how do the plant-based milk alternatives compared to whole milk? So I'm going to tell you about the different macronutrients, and then at the end we will do an analysis of them, right? The first example I'm going to talk about is coconut milk. So coconut milk, essentially you will see a variety of brands, but for the most part coconut milk is very rich in fat. Coconut is a fatty nut, and so coconut milk will have about 13 grams of fat. It'll have about 2 grams of carbohydrates and no protein. Or you might come across some brands that might have 1 gram of protein, but very heavy on fat, so not quite as balanced as cow's milk. The second example is oat milk. Oat milk has oats, of course, that's it's a starch. So oat milk will be low on fat, 2 grams of fat. It will have 17 grams of carbohydrates, so oats is a starch or carb, and then it'll have 3 grams of protein. So not quite as balanced as cow's milk. It is very heavy when it comes to carbohydrates and much lower in fat and protein. Then we have rice milk. Rice milk, another sort of starch-based milk. It has about 2.5 grams of fat. It'll have 10 grams of carbohydrates and 0 protein. So again, not as balanced as cow's milk. Very high on the starch content or carbohydrate content. Next, we have a nut milk. Here I'm going to use a nut milk example. There are so many varieties of nut milk now. There's macadamia, there's hazelnut, there's cashew milk, and then there's almond milk, one of the more popular ones. I'm going to use almond milk as the example. The nut milks are relatively similar, but for almond milk, you will see it has about 11 grams of fat, 3 grams of carbohydrates, and 5 grams of protein. Variations depending on the brands, but for the most part almond milk has a higher fat content, and then the carbohydrate and protein content lowish. You have a little bit more protein than those starch-based milks, but not quite as balanced as whole cow's milk. And then the last example is soy milk. So soy milk was very popular. Like when I was growing up, that was the most popular milk alternative. Since then we have all the nut-based milks and the starch-based or carbohydrate-based milks. But soy milk has about 4.5 grams of fat, it has 5 grams of carbohydrates, and then it's actually very rich in protein. It has 9 grams of protein. So looking at this, you can see that soy milk might be the most balanced of these milk alternatives, though not quite as balanced as whole milk. It has about 9, it is higher on the protein level compared to coconut milk, which is higher on the fat level, right? Which ones, as a diabetic, which one might be a little worse for you? Which one might be better for you? Well, I think the obvious answer is that those starch-based or carbohydrate-based milks might be worse off for a diabetic who's really trying to minimize the increase in blood sugar levels, right? So the oat milk, high on carbohydrates, 17 grams of carbohydrates, right? So that's going to have a higher glycemic index because it really doesn't have much fat or protein to balance out those carbohydrates. And then rice milk as well with 10 grams of carbohydrates, so a little less than oat milk, but also it doesn't have any protein, it just has a small amount of fat to balance out the 10 grams of carbs, right? Which ones are a little more balanced? Well, soy milk, you can see, is probably the most balanced of these. Now, soy milk sort of fell out of favor because there's this feeling that soy has these sort of plant-based estrogens, which may contribute to things like breast cancer and maybe ovarian cancer. I think that is being debunked right now. There's probably not so much evidence supporting that, but still, it's fallen out of favor a little bit. But soy milk probably is the most balanced of these 5 milk alternatives that I mentioned, right? My personal favorite is actually coconut milk because it just has such a rich, creamy flavor. Some people are not able to tolerate these really fatty things, but at the end of the day, you're probably just going to need a small amount if you're putting it in things like coffee or hot chocolate or whatever, right? So, you know, it's just personal preference and also personal preference for the taste. Coconut milk is hard to come by, and I'll talk about some of the things you have to really look out for when you're looking at these milk alternatives, right? But almond milk might be another one that's relatively well balanced because it has that good natural fat content, and then it has some protein as well. It's quite low on carbs. So almond milk actually has lower carbs or fewer carbohydrates compared to the soy milk. So almond milk might be an overall favorite because it's not excessively heavy on the fat compared to the other macronutrients. So almond milk might actually be the best one for diabetes. Well, coconut milk is probably the best one, but it might be too rich, and then you mightn't be able to come across a good quality coconut milk. So barring not being able to come across coconut milk, right, a good version of coconut milk, then the next best is probably going to be almond milk. And then if you're allergic to nuts, then the next best would be soy milk, right? And because it's relatively well balanced. The absolute worst is really these starch-based milks. Oat milk, apparently, I've never had oat milk, but apparently it has a very creamy consistency because it has some amount of soluble fiber. So people like the creamy consistency of oat milk, and it doesn't have a very heavy flavor, right? So oat milk, some people like, but really heavy on the starch. And then of course rice milk. So for diabetics, you know, you really need to watch your starch intake. Now, okay, you will make your decision about which of these 5 you might want to choose for yourself. In the grand scheme of things, you might still opt to choose oat milk because you realize you're just having a small amount in your coffee. So, and if you're having a good breakfast, maybe to go with that, or if you're adding other things to your coffee like protein and maybe even butter, if you're trying to make a sort of bulletproof version of coffee or butter coffee, then it might not be the worst thing if you add some good oat milk, good quality oat milk to your coffee. But how do you go about choosing better versions of these alternate milks, right? The thing about these is that in the supermarket, you will look at a wide variety. It's option overload, very hard to choose. Many of them will have the fancy labels, non-GMO, gluten-free, keto-friendly, diabetes-friendly, all these things. But how on earth do you know that these things are really friendly to your overall health and your metabolism? You need to look at the labels. Flip to the back and look at the labels. And unfortunately, most of these plant-based milks have lots and lots of additives. And many of these additives are very unfriendly. I had looked at one label and tragically I saw that the second ingredient was canola oil. Why are you going to make a milk alternative that has the second ingredient as canola oil? The first ingredient is water. That is not healthy. We know that these inflammatory oils like canola oil vegetable oil, they promote inflammation in the body. Okay, so to have an alternate milk that has these oils is going to be overall negative for your health, right? A lot of them have a lot of gums as well to sort of thicken them, and also these gums are fillers that enable them to use, the companies to use less of the active ingredient, less of the nuts. And so as much as maybe a healthier brand might contain 2 tablespoons of almond nuts to make up the higher concentration that we spoke about of the protein and the fat, if you're having a lower quality brand because they put the gums and the seed oils and all sorts of other flavors, you're going to have a small amount of almonds, cup for cup, in the different the milk that you're having, right? So you really need to look at the ingredient list. Some of the ingredients: guar gum, sunflower lecithin, some of them put pea starch in it, some put sunflower oil, canola oil, and then a lot of them have artificial flavors, or just general, you know, they might say natural flavors, but you don't really know what that means, right? So you definitely want to look at the ingredient list and see how long is this list. The longer the ingredient list, the worse that thing probably is for you. Okay, second point to look at, to consider when looking at these, is the flavored ones. The flavored varieties of these alternate milks tend to have added sugar. So the chocolate flavored ones, the vanilla flavored ones, all the flavored ones almost always have some amount of added sugar. You're going to want to be very, very careful. Okay, unfortunately, the better ones, as with anything in life, the better ones are more expensive, and that may make them less accessible to many people, unfortunately, who might benefit from them, right? The better brands I've come across: Elmhurst, ELMHURST, they seem to make the best quality alternative milks, because when you look at their ingredient list, all they have is whatever, the nut or oat, and then water. 1 or 2 of them might have salt added, but essentially 2 to 3 ingredients in this brand. And when you compare that brand to other brands, you will see that they have higher amount of protein, higher amount of fat, and less carbohydrate overall, right? So a better balance. Another brand that I came across was West Soy, and they make a good solid quality soy milk compared to some of the others, because all it has is soybeans and water, right? So when you're looking at your ingredient list, you want to see that it has whatever the nut is and water, or the starch and water, right? When you start seeing all the gums and other fillers and flavors, a lot of them have vitamins and minerals and just all sorts of things added, so that they can say on the label vitamin rich, nutrient rich, keto friendly, etc., right? The proof is in the pudding. Look and see exactly what they're putting in, right? At the end of the day, if you're not able to afford the higher quality ones, which, you know, even I think some of these things are like expensive. And then another thing as well is that high quality ones are not available in run-of-the-mill supermarkets. So, you know, I live in Mississippi, in a small town, and we just don't have access to things like Elmhurst and West Soy. So we're going to have those that have all the gums and artificial flavors and so on. So maybe it might be best to essentially invest in a small blender. I remember on Shark Tank I saw somebody was selling a blender where you just put in the nuts and water and then blend it for a few seconds, and you have your alternative nut-based or whatever other type of milk. You might just have to invest in a little blender, or just use your regular blender, use your nuts that you might soak overnight, blend them with water, and make your own plant-based or nut-based milk. You might have a little bit of an investment up front, but in the long run, you know that you're not having unwanted ingredients that in the long run will probably negatively impact your health. I hope you all found this video helpful. Yes, alternative or plant-based milks are plentiful. Yes, they might be good for you, but in many cases, they might be quite bad for you. If you found this video helpful, definitely share it with somebody else who you know might benefit from it, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.